And now here's part 2 of our episode.
This is not the only song on the album that has pig in the title in some way.
Right.
I mean,
right.
also there's March of the Pigs, and there's also when he did move into the studio, when he created the studio in the Sharon Tate house, the studio, he did call it Le Pig.
Le Pig, yeah.
I believe. Thoughts on why he's so fascinated with. I mean, is it like a Lord of the Flies thing? Is it like, what's going on? And doesn't a pig corpse appear in the video for Closer too?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it has that garishness, like that corpse pig in the videos. And so, but because when I hear pig, there's also, in OK Computer, squeaking, I can't say it right now.
Kicking, squealing, Gucci little piggy.
There we go. Little piggy.
A pig in a cage
and
on
then in Beatles songs, like they also referenced the pigs as well. Mm-hmm. And so because I was listening to the Beatles more recently when I had listened to Nine Inch Nails, I made that connection, right? Like is pig, is it like a society thing? Like, are we pigs? Like, are we thinking like, what was that story in high school we read about the pigs?
Animal Farm.
Animal Farm.
Oh yeah.
So,
oh my God.
So I was thinking, is it that, or right. is this a commentary on society or whatever? Mm-hmm. I was a teenager. I wanted to think more deeply about things, and so I wanted to feel like I was thinking about something on a different level. But I don't know. And I also think about is it me? Is he talking about himself? Is he calling himself a pig, or just They say that was what he called his one of the guitarists, I think, that was working. Someone that now I'm just rambling.
Okay, that's okay. Well, there's something about consumption. There's something about like pigs being a symbol for excess and indulgence.
Yeah.
And if there's an element to self-punishment of this album, then like I think something that makes a lot of sense for me is this guy is dealing with this oncoming addiction. This guy is dealing with feeling victim to these substances, or maybe even just the excesses of being a human in general. We require so much food and water and stuff and money that it's hard not to feel like you're just a pig that is constantly consuming things all the time. But Nine Inch Nails is not music that I would call overly indulgent, I don't think, actually. To me, there's this feeling of deprivation, maybe, or this feeling of like trying to create a discipline within yourself. Maybe it's the sharpness of the music that makes me feel that way. But maybe you disagree. You can disagree if you want.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like it's allowing you to indulge in that feeling.
Yeah.
It's allowing you to indulge in the depravity. Like,
yes, okay, that's a good point.
Because you talk about like Closer. It's indulging in sex at its most, primal, basic. I guess if we're gonna say it, fuck you like an animal, right? Mm-hmm. It makes it primal. It just makes it, and so it reduces it, right? But the song's like talking about like indulging in it. So just wallowing in your filth of excess, drugs, excess, sex, excess, and just taking everything to the limit because you don't care about yourself. So then why not just dive in? And so there's that indulgence.
I would agree with that. I think, this is not the album that's going to cure you of your depression or bring you out of a poor mental health state. This is the album that you're going to listen to when you are in the wallowing phase and you sort of need to live in those feelings a little while so that eventually you can come out of it.
Exactly. I used to listen to this. So my freshman year of college, get thrown into the Northeast, growing up in Miami. It was very was a very different experience for me. I again felt like an outsider. I gravitated towards this album, and it was something I would listen to when I would come back to my room from a class, and none of my roommates were there. I would put it on because one of them had a really good like sound system. I would turn it up really, really loud, like obnoxiously loud. And I would lay on the floor and feel the vibrations, just experience it on a visceral, like purely visceral, like level.
Yes. You get 1 million points for that, by the way. 1 million points.
But to me, it was like when you want to scream, and that was my way of being able to scream without. So it's just being able to just feel it externally all at once, loud on the ears, like feeling the vibration on the floor, and just being able to to scream in that way.
Yeah, I feel like the progression of Nine Inch Nails has been from a place of noise and mess and indulgence to a place where now, more current Nine Inch Nails is a lot more streamlined, I guess, a way of describing it. I mean, you think about it's not Nine Inch Nails technically, it's Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross doing the soundtrack for The Social Network and doing the music for Watchmen. And when you listen to that music, I mean, that is expertly crafted score to a film and to a TV show, and it's like it's smartly done, very pared down, but also like appeals to you emotionally. But it's not downward spiral at all.
But it's working on those psychological levels, and it's amazing how music can do that. How we're being, it's a game that it's almost like a game. It's a contract that we enter willingly to say, let's play. When someone is producing something like this, that their intention is to elicit an emotion, to elicit a feeling, whether it's while you're watching something or while you're listening, but they want to share that with you. They want to say, I made you think, I made you feel that way, you know?
I'm curious how you came to choosing this album and like what your standards for perfection were.
Well, Mike told me, Mike chopped the legs off of me right when he asked me to come on this podcast, and just right out of the gate just knocked out 2 of my heavy hitters. And so I was like, okay, I got to dig deeper.
Yeah, for our listeners, just so you're aware, we've told everyone in this season that they can't choose one of the artists from the previous season, so that we're not subjecting you to the same artists over and over again. So by eliminating both Radiohead and Sleater-Kinney, I essentially cut Nitza in half, is what ended up happening there.
Yes. But yeah, so you forced me to dig deeper, and
great,
and really thinking about why do I, what makes a perfect album? I like when I like receiving something that was intended to be listened to from beginning to end, that has a story to tell, and the sequencing, when it's like, this is not an album that you just listen to. You don't just say, you know what, I want to listen to Piggy right now, so I'm just going to put that on and then move on to something else. This is something that you listen to from start to finish, and it's meant to be consumed that way, because the end of each song draws you into the next, and it takes you the song is the album is taking you into this spiral, and it's making you feel that you have to listen to the whole thing.
This album would be terrible on shuffle.
Awful. Wouldn't make any sense.
Would make no sense whatsoever.
Wouldn't make a lick of sense. So completeness, I think, is something we hear a lot, that there is a greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing. And rarely has anyone said that they shuffle these albums, just because of the intentionality of how they've been put together by these artists. And we've had some of the big, we've had Prince, and we've had Carole King, some of the biggest musicians of all time we've talked about so far. What about skips? Where do you stand on skips in an album? Can a perfect album have skips?
I think for me, a perfect album doesn't have one, because you consume it as a whole. Like, like what am I gonna forward through a warm place on the downward spiral just because there's like no lyrics or no, but no, it's like that song is like, it's that breath you need to take before finishing. And it's like it's a mercy that you're getting, in order to be able to finish the journey. Right. So no, like I think everything, those tracks have a purpose on them. You see them a lot on like Radiohead albums too, that there's these little like soundscapes that sometimes get put in an album. If you're listening to the album, there are no skips because you're intended to be consuming it as a whole. Like I still listen to albums that way. And so that's how I stand on.
Justice for Tree Fingers. Just want to point that
out. Justice for Tree Fingers. Right. We were all thinking it. We were all thinking Tree Fingers is running through our head. We've been joking about Tree Fingers for years, my friends and I. We're like, hey, if I ever get married, guys, just make sure that Tree Fingers is my first dance. Because I just think that's me. And if I marry someone, they're going to get that. They'll understand that Tree Fingers needs to be it.
I remember, Nitza, when we saw Radiohead that one time at Liberty State Park, that someone in the crowd had a giant sign that said, "I lost my virginity to Tree Fingers." I remember it so clearly that someone made that sign.
They're truly blessed. Have you seen Nine Inch Nails live?
No.
Nitza, you haven't?
I would be terrified.
Really?
Because of the crowds. So I tend to get claustrophobic. Sure. So I need open air. I need to feel like there's an escape. So the crowd that would be at a Nine Inch Nails concert at the time when I was younger, I would have been scared to go. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be in the mosh or anything like of that nature. And because the songs, the listening, the target audience, or, the people that gravitated towards it when it came out, a lot of it was, like angry kids. And so, there was a lot of that shoving. And so, no, I have not seen them. I probably would now because Trent Reznor is, what did you say, 50?
Oh, I actually don't. I know he's in his 50s. I mentioned he's got 5 kids now.
And so. He's a dad now.
He looks good, though. He looks so good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, he looks great.
A friend of the pod, Ashlyn Lozano, I believe at one point forwarded me an article of Trent Reznor, something about Trent Reznor attending a PTA meeting, and said, "I think this is your aesthetic, Trent Reznor at a PTA meeting." And I was like, I've really no one's ever been more correct about how sort of art I like to make.
Well, touching back on what the target demographic of Nine Inch Nails is, I think that is one of the things that took me so long to get to Nine Inch Nails, is that I had, in a not very generous, closed-minded young person way, I think all of the kids that I saw growing up who wore Nine Inch Nails t-shirts, and it was Nine Inch Nails t-shirts that I would see, it was like the really angry white guys who I wasn't really friends with at the time.
Right.
Like it wasn't what my crowd was listening to at the time. And those guys that were wearing those Nine Inch Nails, I was always a little afraid of them. And it's just like, you try to be curious and not judgmental, and you can't. Oftentimes we fail at that as adults, but certainly as kids as well. And so I think that there's something really, I feel like Trent would love that you brought this album on, is one of the things I feel, because there is this idea of what a Nine Inch Nails fan looks like, and to acknowledge the fact that this sort of music can appeal to people even beyond the people that want to mosh and the people that want to get their aggression out in that way, has to be, that would have to be a great thing as an artist to hear that the mold was broken in that way.
Right. Yeah. That it spoke to something beyond. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he's even said he thinks some of his fans would kind of misunderstood his intention. I mean, the song "Big Man with a Gun," which I will not share the lyrics with our listeners here at this point. You can go ahead and look them up. But I think a lot of people thought that, oh, he's glorifying like having a gun and, you know, being kind of sexually aggressive, and he said no.
But the song is a parody of that.
It's such a parody. I mean, if you the excess of the lyrics within the song and the way the song, and it's this short little like minute and 20-second song that does that, which I feel like is also him probably making a bit of a joke there as well.
Oh yeah, wink wink.
Yeah. But like, I think this happens a lot. I think sometimes artists get misunderstood by their fans. I mean, it's happened to Pearl Jam too. That's why, I mean, they even wrote a song about it on the Vitology album called "Not For You," like which is about all their fans who were embracing certain politics that they didn't subscribe to and were, you know, it can happen. But, you know, once you create art and put it out there, you can't control how people consume it.
I agree. I think some of the artists that I enjoy the most are the ones that, you know, they try not to talk too much about what they meant because they want to leave it open. Like when you look at Radiohead's lyrics, they tend to be like people are like, these lyrics are nonsensical. They, you know, what are they talking about? Are they making a political statement? Is this about, you know, a personal relationship? Like what's going on here? And the beauty is that they leave it open so that you can now be a part of that. You now have that special connection to that song because it's not so set in stone. It means something to you. It meant something to them. And now it's a whole nother thing.
Probably my favorite. Sorry for all the Radiohead content on this one, folks.
I know.
It was bound to happen. It was bound to happen.
Yeah. But I think my favorite Radiohead song is There. And that, I think, illustrates that thing that we were talking about with Trent, where there's a lot of obscuring of the lyrics, obscuring, and then something's out in the clear, right? And so there does that really well. It's like a lot of kind of cryptic, poetic language, and then we're all accidents waiting to happen.
Oh, beautiful
which is kind
line.
of, I know, I think about it lives rent free in my head, as the kids would say. There's just something about you're taking us on this lyrical journey. You're creating a world with that, and then you drop something in that's really going to just make you think about your life. And the balance of those two things, I think, is great art. That is where great art happens.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some more points. I'm going to give you some more points for Tree Fingers, bringing Tree Fingers to the pod. This might be our first Tree Fingers reference. 600 points for Tree Fingers.
I mean, I don't know about you, Nitza, but sometimes I find some of his music and, frankly, some of the lyrics to just be downright optimistic, actually.
Trends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to our standout track, but I just think about, I mean, because I texted Tyler and said I needed a salve from the Downward Spiral, so I listened to The Fragile, which I feel like anyone who's a Nine Inch Nails fan would agree, and anyone who's not would be like, what are you doing? But even listening to the other album and just how remarkably how he wants to climb out of it. And that's underneath all the lyrics. I think it's underneath Downward Spiral too, even though it feels like sort of wallowing in misery and filth, that there's this desire to climb out of it somehow. And in his later albums, I think that becomes clearer.
Yeah.
But
I mean, basically, I think that Trent Reznor has shared his own psychological journey with us as he's tried to work through it himself.
Yeah.
I think if Trent Reznor had gone to therapy, we would not have it. Right. We would not have had the Downward Spiral or The Fragile, or, you know, it just we wouldn't have it.
Right.
But he didn't go to therapy, and instead we get to, you know, share this intensely private, you know, descent and just observe him go through it, and then we're able to see him come through on the other side. I mean,
he does.
I mean, we've seen, you know, we are able to see it happen, and I think that's beautiful. And that's probably more terrifying for Trent Reznor. I think that's not. I mean, there's a vulnerability in exposing yourself so raw.
And we have the myth, right? Michael and I have been fascinated by this myth for years of the self-destructive, the self-destructive artist, the self-destructive musician in particular, that is a figure in our media. It's just for good or for ill. And I think that it leads to the harmful narrative that one must be damaged, or one must have this overwhelming sense of a problem that they need to solve, or something that hinders them in order to create good art. But he's an amazing example of somebody who I think, not only does he take us on the journey of all of the dirty details of that descent at this stage of his career, and then he's come out on the other end to probably have more of a universal acclaim and a more widespread influence for having worked through all those things, and for having gotten sober, and for becoming an amazing collaborator and continuing to challenge himself. He's an amazing story for, you don't just have to be purely damaged to do something beautiful and to do something that matters to your audience.
I think you can't get sober without going to therapy, right? Because sobriety comes from a place of getting in touch with why we self-destruct through substance or whatever our vice may be, right? So to see that a healed person, right? You're now like working to heal yourself. You can still create
in the process always.
Right. Yeah. You can still create beauty and something that everyone can also connect to, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can all connect to that process of healing and feeling more complete or more whole, knowing that you still have cracks, but not feeling completely alone and broken and just in the pits. Like, that there's hope as you mature.
Right. And vulnerability is here to stay. I mean, I feel like the whole conversation around, maybe it's been obvious forever, but I feel like the first time I ever heard somebody talk about it really meaningfully was Brene Brown for me. And that was back in college. And I think that the whole conversation that we have around mental health and around vulnerability he's a great example of this, because all of the beautiful, hopeful things that he says mean so much more because he's so painfully honest about the terrible, dark things inside him. And so you can't really have one without the other. And that's why, that's why it stays away from that sentimentality, that saccharine thing that smacks as untrue to us. Right. That's why it's so effective.
Well, Nitza, before we go back to the scoreboard, is there anything you've made a very strong case here, but is there any sort of closing argument you'd want to make for our listeners? I mean, and also maybe consider this question too for our listeners: when is the right time to listen to the Downward Spiral?
That's a great question.
Let's see. Michael.
He's so good.
Because I'm trying to separate myself from you. I mean, not you, but from telling someone else, like, when do you listen to this? I like horror. Mm-hmm. I like, so there's a place in there's a place in yourself where you want the release that you get from watching horror, right? Mm-hmm. There's a release that we get. So I guess there's a release that you get from watching a film that delves into like darkness, whether it be like, sometimes like really dirty dramas where like people are just being incredibly cruel to each other. There's a place that we all have where we need that release of, I am in a place right now, whether it be I'm anxious about something and I need a release, or I just want the distraction and I want to just like let myself go into the fear. Mm-hmm. That's, I think if you haven't had a personal like growing up relationship with this album and you're just like coming out of nowhere, like, hey, let's listen to this, I would say that would be my answer. It's like when you want a release, an adrenaline release, like you would get from like watching a horror movie or riding a roller coaster.
Yeah,
that's good.
That's yeah, well said. Well, I think that's the perfect thing to leave the listener with in terms of how they might want to interact with it. Let's go back to the board and see how you did. We're going to take it from the most recent points. 600 points you got for bringing tree fingers to the pod. So you got 400. I put down 450 points for the idea you were talking about with completeness in an album, because that idea of something being packaged in a very intentional way, and for you to experience it in that way, that is absolutely a tenet of a perfect album. So well said on that front. You got 1,000,000 points for your anecdote about lying on the floor with it cranked all the way up on your roommate's sound system. What a way to experience this album. Come on,
right?
We need to do that. 300 points for hurt in our conversation around hurt and what that is, for somebody like Johnny Cash singing that at the end of their life, for somebody like Trent Reznor in the midst of the creation of this album. 600 points for saying this was like an old friend when you came back to it. That's what a perfect album should do. It should feel like your favorite coat, your favorite sweatshirt that you put on. It was just ready for you, ready and waiting. And 200 points for the idea of misfits and how music has the ability to connect us misfits, however we feel misfit, and bridging those gaps. And then I'm right back to 14 points for you got 14 primal screams for your initial preamble about the power of music in general and its ability to unlock something deep inside. And then combine that with the 10 9-inch nails that you gave Michael for his recap. It's looking like a pretty strong board.
Well, I mean, I'm going to ask you this one, Tyler, because I already know how I feel about this album. So considering all those points, Tyler,
yes,
would you say that 9-Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral is a perfect album?
Nitza, with everything you said, with the story that you were able to bring to us, this unique story of accessing this album and the power that it still has today, absolutely. I think that you have made a case that The Downward Spiral is absolutely deserving of inclusion in the This One Goes to 11 pantheon. It truly goes to 11.
Wow. I feel so honored right now. Wow. I feel like I need a placard that said, I convinced This One Goes to 11.
We might need to work on that, actually. I like that idea. I'm putting that in the hopper.
We've been talking about merch. We've been talking about merch.
There you go.
Merch.
There you go.
This has been awesome, Nitza. Thanks so much for coming on. It's truly a pleasure to meet you. I hope we get to meet in person sometime very soon.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you guys about this. This is really fun. I was scared coming in, but it was a really fun ride.
Well, yeah, you know how I feel about you, so but again, I love you, of course. So we're gonna leave our listeners with our standout track, which again we have not chosen either of the singles, like the radio singles from this. Tyler, what did we choose for our standout track?
We chose "I Do Not Want This," which is roughly in the middle of the album, and I think the reason it was between "Hurt" and this for me. And I went with "I Do Not Want This" because I think it's good to show our listeners one of the lesser known songs on it, but also it feels like it has all of the elements that this album does really well, both lyrically and musically. And just to a few of the lyrics that are still sticking with me are the chorus, if you will, of I want to know everything. I want to fuck everyone in the world. I want to do something that matters.
Yeah.
And that kind of echoes that Michael and I were talking about this. It echoes the Radiohead thing from the Bends of I want to live, breathe. Yep. I want to be a part of the human race. I think there's shared energy there.
Absolutely.
So it's that sneakily hopeful thing, right? Sneakily hopeful. It's there. So that's our standout track.
All right. So enjoy listening to that, everybody, and we'll see you next week.